Thanks for checking into our latest Trade to Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Well, we're going to bring in the founder and chairman of ATAI Life Sciences, Christian Angermayer, to give us a current state of affairs of the overall psychedelic space. As we know, MDMA was declined last month. There's a lot of misconception regarding this space right now. So we want to hear from probably the most respected person in the space on what's next for this industry. So let's welcome in TDR co-host Anthony Varel. Good to see you. Happy Monday and good day in the market for the space, don't you think?
Yeah, it was a great day in the market.
Well, lots to dive into with the show. And as I said off the top, we want to get a current state of affairs regarding the psychedelic space. So let's welcome in the founder and chairman of ATAI Life Sciences. He's the real life Benjamin Button, because each time I see him, he looks like he's getting younger and younger. Christian Angermayer, good to see you. How are things?
You know exactly how to charm me already at the beginning.
How are you?
All good. Yeah, thanks for having me again.
So where are you? Are you in Europe right now, or are you over here in North America?
Yes. No, yeah. I'm in London right now.
Nice.
Nice.
How's the summer been? Relatively, well, it was quick, I think, for a lot of people, but for the most part, I know there's a lot of stuff that happened regarding the industry, but how are you embracing, I guess, everything? And I know, I don't want to get too much into detail about what went right, what went wrong with obviously Lykos and the MDMA trials, but there's a lot of investors out there right now, I think, that are, have legitimate concerns about the industry, and there's any short-term catalysts. And when it comes to commercialization of drugs, the closest thing is Comp 360, which is 2027. But if you're concerned all about the space right now, what's the message that you're saying to, I guess, the people that you're speaking to among investors?
Well, I'm not concerned. And hopefully people shouldn't be concerned, because where do we start? Maybe the most important, although it's not a psychedelic or a Thai specific argument, but I said it, I think, when we saw each other last time, aside of obviously operational success, we all of us, all psychedelic stocks, but also in general biotech stock, need a change of sentiment. So biotech is still the only, more or less only, let's say, high growth sector which hasn't recovered. If you look at large tech, but even small cap tech, but crypto is a great example, Bitcoin, more or less fully recovered from the interest rate induced downturn.
Yes.
Biotech hasn't. The reason, I think, is multifold, but I think one of the main reasons is that the biotech industry, the investors especially, not the companies themselves, but the investor set was comparable, or is still comparable small. If you take tech investors, that's a multitude more of them than sort of the very still, although it's a global sector, niche biotech sector. So the entire pressure induced by interest rates on stock market or biotech stock prices has actually kind of led to almost, you could say, a wipeout of many funds, many investors whatsoever.
Yeah.
So it takes longer to rebuild that industry. So Bitcoin, and again, broad tech, had much more a stable foundation to come back quicker. But now the positive thing is, I deeply believe biotech is now really starting to come back. The industry is sort of about to, the investors industry, rebuild itself. And most important of all, interest rates start coming down. So that altogether, I think, will give us a favorable, long story short, macro environment for biotech, which we need in order to sort of, at least in terms of stock market prices, which also psychedelic stocks need to sort of drive again.
Okay, so taking this a step further, and more specifically the psychedelic space, how do you see this industry? There's a lot of trials out there right now. How do you see this playing out? Is it still the status quo? I realize these are different trials. These are different compounds. Have you had conversations with representatives from Big Pharma recently? What's their take, based on how they're viewing this space right now?
I would say, yes, so Big Pharma is definitely interested. So we as ATAI have a lot of discussions. But what we also can clearly see, and I think it's wrong on the pharma side, that they think they have more time to position themselves, strike partnership, take over companies than I believe they have. Why do they think that?
Okay.
They look at Spravato from Johnson & Johnson, and Spravato had a very slow start. And now just this year, but finally became a so-called blockbuster drug with more than $1 billion of revenues. So they believe actually that all psychedelic drugs because of the novelty, the treatment paradigm shift we need among patients and providers will just take a little bit of time. And that's where I personally have a 180-degree different opinion, because Spravato was years ago, that the world and sort of society and the perception of psychedelics was different when did it come to market, like 5 years ago or so whatever. Second, and don't want to criticize Johnson & Johnson, but Spravato is kind of the outlier in their product portfolio. So when back then, when Spravato was approved, when I talked to Johnson & Johnson sort of middle management people who were responsible for the rollout, they all back then, again, different time, were saying, oh, we kind of don't know what that is. Like we normally do cancer drugs and whatever. So a kind of psychedelic-ish drug was kind of a novelty within Johnson & Johnson. So I think they needed a year or two to get the internal head around what actually are we selling there. It's, by the way, side note, always this famous discussion, Rick Doblin, where I kind of, on a personal level, agree with him. It's just not what you can do as an industry. Like people who sort of work with these substances, obviously, I think easier know what it is if they've tried it. But anyway, but like sort of what I want to say, time was different. Johnson & Johnson didn't really like know how to embrace it till they found their mojo. And now it is a multi-billion-dollar drug. But I think that's not going to be that slow in the future when, for example, Compass and ATAI bring drugs to market, because we obviously fully sort of embrace the sort of nature or that these substances are psychedelics. Yeah. Also, by the way, Spravato has sort of pioneered now that what we call this 2-hour treatment window. And there's this, the saying like the pioneers take the arrows and the settlers take the land. Like we actually, thanks Johnson & Johnson, we go into sort of an existing infrastructure of therapists who are more and more widely successfully using Spravato, so they just then can take on psilocybin from Compass and all the other type drugs. So the infrastructure is now there, but most importantly, times have changed. Like go on Netflix, front page, how to change your mind. Everybody who's listening, just be mindful, because it's happening so often that people maybe don't even realize it, but how often at dinner conversations or whatever, psychedelics are coming up. Like I think psychedelics have arrived. This is not like almost no novelty anymore. And I'm very, very sure, long story short, that when Compass starts rolling out their psilocybin end of I would say somewhere in 2026, and maybe end of 25, but most likely early 26. And then ATAI is rolling out the other psychedelics, the staggered years behind. I think it's going to meet a very ripe and open market. Okay. And that is what pharma is underestimating, but good for us.
So Christian, I mean, you were talking about pioneers and settlers. We've been covering this sector since its inception. And I mean, what we have seen as of recent was sort of shakeups in the human capital at the top of some of these companies. With this increased investment interest that you're thinking about from like a capital rotation standpoint, and as we get closer to commercialization, do you see the human capital kind of rotating out that's currently in and bringing in, let's say, seasoned executives from the current pharma sector into a bunch of these companies?
Meaning I'm very I would say, because it sounds like the question would sound, so I don't want to, so is as if the people who were there so far are not seasoned.
No, not saying.
I would rather, by the way, I would say and Shaker, the change, we promoted our chief scientific officer at ATAI to CEO. Florian is taking a little bit off. Compass got Kabir in a while ago. The truth is, by the way, and I see it, and luckily, I always have that energy. I never thought about taking a break in my life, but the truth is, by the way, I see that in tech, I see that in biotech, I see that in all these sectors who went through pretty hard years the last, let's say, 2 years. People get exhausted, but it has nothing to do with psychedelics particularly. I think you always have then people who say, look, I need to take a break, want to take a sabbatical, whatever. But I don't want to say that the people coming in are more seasoned at all. It's just I think it's, at least in the companies I can talk about, Compass and ATAI, the changes in the top or the add-ons were purely sort of for individual reasons. Where we say, look, I think Florian is running ATAI, and he's just leaving at the end of the year, so it's a very super friendly. And we were working together on the transition. He was just like, look, after 7 years? Yeah, I need a break. Yeah. And I can understand it. 7 years is a long time, but he will stay in one form or the other very connected to ATAI.
Yeah, definitely. And then, I mean, one thing that we were talking about for a long time in the psychedelic space were catalysts. So, I mean, we had the MAPS FDA meeting. We had the MAPS FDA decision. I mean, what are some other catalysts that you're looking at right now in the psychedelic space, let's say prior to commercialization in late 2026 to 2027?
So, by the way, let's maybe one, because you had the question before, and then I'm always answering like it, but I didn't. So let's maybe one sentence or one second about Lykos. I think people know it, but I want to say it again. It was not a decision against MDMA,
okay.
Nor at all against psychedelics, because MDMA is not even a psychedelic. It's kind of in the same world, but it was a decision against the data set presented to the FDA by Lykos. And I don't want to go into too much detail because it doesn't matter. I think it was a flawed data set. I think it was kind of leading up to that. It was clear, they tried to kind of save it. I would have hoped for patients it would have worked out. But I have to say, I was a little bit worried because one of the ways they tried to save it was to sort of mobilize also politics. And I'm a very deep believer that in any form of drug development, has nothing to do with psychedelics, politics has no place. It's all about science and data, and you have to show the outcome of trials, which sort of science or which are supposed to show, and then you get an approval. You shouldn't need to rally politicians or whatever, one way or the other. I think it's very also dangerous to politicize medical drug development. But an important is it was not a decision against MDMA or whatever psychedelics at all. The FDA made clear they want that, if at all. But that has been already the viewpoint of ATAI and Compass before. It was a final clear verdict from the FDA that while, by the way, people sometimes confused it when I read online stuff, the FDA doesn't want to see mixed up is how do I explain? They don't want to see a sort of almost call it a combination trial of therapy plus the drug, because then it's very hard to standardize it. And again, science is all about standardization. So by the way, what will be the case, what I always said, since we know each other, while you do psychedelics, you need a therapist. So the FDA made also clear, but that is not full therapy. That is sort of, you get sort of psychological assistance in the moment when you do psychedelics. And then personally, and by the way, let's a little bit think about chemotherapy. You would say if somebody undergoes chemotherapy, you would also say, please have a healthy lifestyle, ideally change things, stop smoking, whatever are your problems. The same, the recommendation would always be from me to a patient, or from me to in general say, I think still full therapy and sort of psychedelics together are ideal, but the FDA wants to see psychedelics working standalone without a full therapy, but with obviously psychological assistance while you take it. And that's, by the way, how all the Compass trials and ATAI trials always have been set up. So we always make clear we believe in therapy, but let's phrase it very positively, because it is actually very strong. Psychedelics are that powerful, at least in the trials we have shown data so far, that just psychedelics with psychological assistance in a moment deliver groundbreaking, really transformational results. My personal belief, and we're going to do a lot of studies after approval, would be, and if you then do full therapy, it's going to be even better. But don't mix both together while you sort of try to get the drug approved. Because then it's very hard for the FDA to sort of go through the data. And so that was safe to say.
Is it safe to say, from an approval perspective, psychedelic assisted therapy is what's going to be, I guess, the right semantics moving forward versus pure psychedelic therapy that takes a full
I would say like
therapist to be there
assisting
with you?
in the moment when you take it, and then people have the choice to do additional therapy. But in the approval, at least, you need to show. And by the way, it's easy to show. I believe it's very easy to show because the drugs are so sort of powerful that just one trip of psilocybin or whatever, again, with the therapist in a moment, is actually bringing profound healing and improvement to patients.
So regardless of what compound was presented to the FDA first, it's all based on the right data and the right data settings. And that's where I think, what have we learned, I guess, from, the trial, being declined by the FDA? And for those that are in the space that are currently conducting trials, like what's the takeaway, I guess, you as a company get from some of the feedback from the FDA that pertains to a different compound, a different trial, a different company? But are there things that you take away from that when you have the opportunity to eventually present to the FDA in a couple of years?
Look, I think that, and I don't want to sound too, how you say, clever or whatever. Like I really mean it. Like, and again, it doesn't make me happy at all that MDMA is now maybe lost forever. At least the racemic, the classical MDMA, or at least will take years. But like a lot of things we said since a very long time. For example, one thing is that, and I think everybody who knows me knows my personal passion for psychedelics.
Yep.
So if you would ask me, I would say, look, it's very clear, let's approve it tomorrow or whatever. But that is not how drug development works. And sort of, and I actually always said to my colleagues from the beginning, from 2016, 17 on, unfortunately, there will be people out there, because it's psychedelics, who will be very skeptical. Yeah. And the answer, as much as I would love it to be, cannot be, no, just believe me, or just talk like, the answer must be, then we are proven, and we have to prove it even more diligently and even more comprehensively in a traditional sort of clinical trial setting. It's always like, again, since we started ATAI and Compass, it's like data, data, data. So if you, for example, look at Compass phase 2B, it's round about the same size than Lykos phase 3 has been. Yeah, and the phase 3 of Compass is
that's a good point.
At least 2 times bigger, if not more, in terms of patients and everything. So trust me, as an entrepreneur, my heart is bleeding if we spend too much money. Yeah,
of course.
But like I was always saying, at least for the first trials, and it was always clear that Compass is one-off, and now it is the trailblazer. We have to be impeccable, because there will be people who are like, really?
What does the FDA look for as far as a patient count? Like, what's an ideal amount? I have an idea, but for those that are still trying to understand the space and how trials are conducted, like what is a realistic amount that they look at this and it becomes more favorable when it comes to certain data that they review?
It depends on the indication, but I don't want to say the wrong number now, but at Compass, it's more than 400 people. I think I don't want to overstate it now, so sorry for that I have not on a feeling it is. Maybe it's even 800 something, but like I'm gonna look it up, like, or maybe one of us can Google it. I mean, but like sort of, you need a solid sort of statistical.
I always thought it was between 500 and 800. That was the number that I've been told. But anyway,
it's 400, but like I just don't want to say the wrong number. But it's a multiple of what MAPS did. Yeah, which by the way, also why had MAPS Lykos such a small trial? Because they worked to a long time. They had just the last minute, but maybe too late, switched into a for-profit mode. Yeah, they were always underfunded. Yeah, and there we can state now capitalism works. Like what Compass and ATAI did, raising money and going public, whatever, gave us sufficient liquidity and sufficient means to conduct sort of these large-scale trials. And again, at the end, it comes down to data, data, data.
Yeah. Well, that's just it, right? And I do know prior to this, there was a lot of dollars that were being allocated into this space the first half of 2024. So that's telling, to say the least. But I guess the main takeaway here is that nothing really changes outside of like all the companies that are currently conducting their trials. But like anything, and this is the challenge, I think, with investors here today, it just takes time. That's biotech for you, though, right?
Yeah. But like maybe last sentence, like, very simplified, I think you can say all psychedelic stocks, the good ones, like in the boom phase of biotech, novelty, or in general in boom phases of any industry, novelty is a bonus.
Yes.
Yeah.
When markets go down, novelty normally is a malus, is like a bad thing. Like, because then people are like, oh Jesus, the world is hard enough, and I buy the cardiovascular whatever treatments. I much more understand, which is much more normal. But like this is why I think all biotech stock or all psychedelic stocks overall lost sort of more than the index, more than the normal stuff, or the more conservative, but the more regular stuff. But as I said, I deeply believe, not regarding one stock, but I deeply believe biotech in general will be one of the best performing asset classes like in the next 12, 18 months. And then normally novelty combined with the massive market all these mental health companies, psychedelic companies are addressing should become a good thing again. So I think stocks like ATAI and Compass have sort of the biggest turnaround potential.
So
if the right data, politicians, you think in Washington, if it's telling based in future trials, they'll look at this like.
No, can I already stop you? No, politicians don't have to look at it. And I don't want them to look at it because medical drug development is not political. It's not cannabis where we want any political decision like you just said with President Trump. No, because it's about cannabis, about consumer, that's a total different bucket.
Completely.
Once you deliver the proper data set to the FDA will approve these drugs like they approve any other drug. Have you ever heard a cancer drug being up for political vote? No, because like it's about data. And if the data is proper, and if the data is telling, and if the data sort of shows, by the way, what we all expect, and everybody knows my conviction in psychedelics, but if the data shows no big risks, like and that sort of effect, and if the data is, how you say, integer, like has integrity, like there was a lot of, again, I don't want to go too much into negative things, but like it's all online, like, there was a lot of critique on the data set of Lykos. But like if you have proper data which shows proper positive impact with manageable, reasonable downside, which I all expect more. Again, we all know psychedelics, super low risk, haven't seen any bad stuff, like plus the upside extremely big. Then the FDA will approve it, and it's a decision of the agency, which then automatically, by the way, will lead to a rescheduling of the drug. No political sort of interference in any way needed and wanted.
When is that? So that's 90 days, correct? That if you presented the correct trial or the correct data, and then as far as rescheduling process, that would then take up to 90 days, or is it longer than that?
Yeah, no, I think it's 90 days. Yeah.
Okay. Last thing I'll bring up to you, I noticed that you had a recent appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast, which I'm sure that was quite the experience, to say the least.
But he's amazing. I was really nervous, but he's amazing.
Well, I hope one day we can have that same kind of stage, but we're obviously working away.
We're going there together. You can always say I was earlier at you than at Joe Rogan.
Yeah. But, my question is outside of just saying like, what was the experience like, but in any way with that appearance, did it help bring a lot of attention towards the space? Like what kind of feedback did you get after, appearing on that podcast?
So most of the topic was about another project I started, the Enhanced Games, which the very simple sentence is like, think about the Olympics. So a major sports event for track and field and similar stuff, but where performance enhancing drugs, colloquially called doping, are not just allowed, then endorsed. But we also spoke a little bit about psychedelics, and actually also the same what we discussed, MAPS and whatever. So I think it was a good sort of platform for our psychedelic work, and then obviously for the work in sports.
Yeah, that's good. Well, great experience to say the least. How was that all set up? Like you have some people that just know him or know his team directly. Like that's pretty.
He was very excited about the idea of the Enhanced Games without knowing us. So we were like,
it's great.
Talked about like in 5 or 6 sort of different podcasts. He was talking to other guests he had about psychedelics. About Enhanced Games. So I don't even remember if we emailed him or he emailed us, whatever, but we were like, hey, like, if you really like it, like, you seem to like it, like, here we are. Yeah, let's have a direct conversation.
Yeah, it's great. Well, I know Anthony wanted to bring up the whole other side of conversation when it came to the Enhanced Games. I think that's another conversation we'll have to save for another time. But, I will say if
you have a question, or like, if you think it's
far away, go ahead. You got to ask one question, Anthony.
I mean, what are there combat sports? was one of my main questions. Like, is there going to be like boxing, wrestling, mixed martial arts?
Yes.
Or are you just talking about pure performance sports?
We want to do also one combat sports, and I know that's gonna be. We need to put a lot of thought in it, because like obviously the immediate answer will be, oh my god, like, and then they can sort of hit themselves harder. To be fair, by the way,
Yeah,
there are studies, like the two really crazy studies are, the very exact number is that WADA, the international doping agency, they made anonymous surveys finding out that more than 40%, I think it was 44% of all track and field athletes have taken forbidden substances. By the way, forbidden, not legally forbidden, because there are a lot of people that get confused, but which are banned in the Olympics. There's a difference. Okay. By the way, 25% of the stuff which you find at GNC is banned at the Olympics, but have taken banned substances, 44%.
Yeah.
The number in combat sports like boxing, which sort of floating around the Hero study, is way more than 50%.
Oh yeah.
So my one of my main arguments how we came up with the idea and why I deeply believe it's the right one is that, by the way, a little bit similar what we just had with drug developments, data and transparency always wins. Yeah, I would love an Olympics which is completely clean, because that makes sense. That's a great idea, but it's not. And then it's very unfair, because like if around about half of the people dope secretly, that makes it completely absurd. Yeah. And the same in combat sport. Like if two people want to fight with each other, at least there should be level playing field, and not one should be like secretly doped and the other not. So transparency is one of our keys. Yeah.
I'm with you on that 100%. I mean, I'm not going to name names, but I know professional athletes that do what they need to do to keep their bodies in tip-top shape. So I think it's I
believe performance enhancing. I wrote a whole blog post about it. By the way, two things, like a little bit of shameless self-promotion of my Substack, but like everything we just discussed on ATAI and more, like at the beginning of the year, I made a very long blog post available publicly on Substack. If you just put in my name and Substack, or also on LinkedIn, either you Google my name on LinkedIn or Substack, then you find all my arguments for ATAI. And I made the same for like performance enhancing in general in sports, but also in sort of life, because I think actually sort of my big thought, which is since I did the blog post actually quicker than I thought becoming reality in the markets, by the way, is that I think performance enhancing in all its forms, it's the biggest financial investment opportunity of the next decade.
Wow.
Yeah. And especially in biotech. And the first one we've seen, I think, and when I tell you now, you're like, okay, yes, that is kind of performance enhancing, was Ozempic and Mounjaro, or are like, so the most sort of successful blockbuster drug of the last 10 years or whatever, these GLP-1 drugs. Yeah. Totally. They added in total more than $1 trillion market cap to Novo Nordisk and Lilly, and by the way, not because it's just for people who want to lose weight, but because, like, what was the number I read? 70 or 80% of the users of Mounjaro and Ozempic are people like me, by the way. I'm on Ozempic because it's just outsourced discipline. So, and my prediction is, and the next one is, if you read the January one, which when I posted it, is becoming reality now. The next one is muscles. So there are some really interesting IPOs lining up for muscle growth, getting muscles without training, or getting muscles easier, and all of that. And again, think about it. If there is a drug available where you put on muscles much easier with less training, not just very old people who need it will take it because they have a sudden muscle loss called sarcopenia, but all of us going to take it, because why would we train more in the gym if we can train less and have the more outcome? And by the way, that was always so, and I'm very consistent in that view. My sort of, and I'm still, by the way, and I know the share price didn't go there at all so far, but I'm still standing what I said at the IPO. I believe in some years from now, ATAI can be a 20 billion plus company. Why? Which obviously now more than actually at the IPO gives us a 100x upside potential. But why? First, and I sound like a broken record, but we hopefully, and I'm deeply convinced, with ATAI and Compass, we're going to solve big parts of the mental health crisis, which already in itself is the number one problem, both of our healthcare system and of society. But beyond that, the same like Ozempic, think about it, like once psychedelics are available, and we all have discussed in previous podcasts, sort of the positive benefits of psychedelics, even for people who are not clinically defined sick, who don't necessarily need to have a depression. Maybe people just have a stressful time in their life and they don't want to get depressive. They know, oh, this is a really hard year for me. I have a breakup. I have a loss of a loved one. I have problems in my job.
It's maintenance. It's maintenance.
It's maintenance. Yeah. And by the way, and then somewhere, even after maintenance, there's one more thing. Look, why do people go to the gym and want perfection? Because, like, by the way, who tells us where actually depression starts? Like, I always turn the question around. You can ask into a room of people and say, who's depressive? And if people would be honest, you maybe would have like 10%. Yeah. But if you turn the question around, it's like, who's truly deeply happy, or who doesn't want to be more happy? Wherever you are, there is a more to it if you want to. Maybe, so my prediction is that give it 5 years from now, give it 6 years from now, like Ozempic for weight loss, and then suddenly people like me take it because it's just better and easier and nicer for them. The same, people will say, you know what, I want to have, like, I'm always very open, like in a country where it's legal, I'm doing a psychedelic trip with a therapist in a proper setting once or twice a year. I can afford it now, I can travel somewhere, whatever. But in the future, people will go to their therapist and say, look, whatever, I want it because it's good for me. It gives me something more. Yeah. And that market is equally big, if not bigger, than the weight loss market, than the muscle market, whatever. It's just like some years away. But I promise we're going to sit here after the approval of Compass psilocybin and the other drugs, and we will revisit it. Yeah. And everybody can sort of bookmark that or record that and hold it against me. Yeah. Or hopefully for me. But you can send that clip. The success, the commercial success of psychedelics, because the market is much wider and bigger than we think, will be much, much bigger than people expect now. And that's sort of my very high conviction view on it. And in that whole topic of enhancements, because we all can need a little bit more happiness in our life, need a little bit of more of that.
All is well then in the psychedelic space. Listen, appreciate the time. Let's keep in touch. But glad we got some of the feedback, but this is encouraging for the space. So I hope that answers some of the people's questions regarding the space. But tell the team that we say hi. And like I said, let's keep in touch. I appreciate the time. Okay.
Anytime back again.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much for having me.
Talk soon.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching our latest podcast. What'd you all think? Is there any information that we're missing? Is there anything you want us to cover? As these industries heat up, we're getting access to more and more big hosts. So let us know the questions that you want us to ask for you. As usual, smash that like button. We want this to go viral. Click on that bell for all notifications for the latest interviews that we're doing. And as usual, let's build this community. Subscribe to our channel because we appreciate it, because we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.